This is Nightly Business Report with Sue Herrera and Bill Griffin.
Strong summer. Home buyers are getting off the sidelines. Sales are up for a second straight month, injecting new life into a slumping market.
Closing the gap. Startups led by women tend to get less funding than their male counterparts. But there's an effort underway to change that.
Top marks. Electric vehicles were put to the test, and a handful scored high, leading some to wonder if they're safer than gas-powered cars. Those stories and much more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Thursday, September 19th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We begin tonight with housing. A home is often the greatest source of wealth and savings for many families. One of the reasons why it's watched so closely by both Wall Street and Main Street. And today we learned that existing home sales rose to the highest level in more than a year. It was a surprise given that expectations were for a decline. And it was welcome news for a housing market that has been lukewarm at best, raising hopes that the slump may be about to end. Diana Olick starts us off tonight.
After a pretty unremarkable spring, the summer housing market saw some unexpected strength. Sales of existing homes jumped to the highest level in over a year in August and were higher annually for the second month in a row. Lower mortgage rates were a big factor. The average rate on the 30-year fixed started May over 4%, but then fell through June and July when the contracts on these August sales were signed.
We anticipated that home buyers will be reaching the market, but the magical power of low mortgage rate clearly enticed buyers to the market.
The biggest problem in the market now is lack of supply, which fell more than 2% annually in August. Home builders did start more houses in August compared with a year ago, and building permits were also strong, indicating future construction. Unfortunately, builders are still not focused on the entry level, and the price gains for existing homes are heating up again.
Right now, the prices are rising strongly because of lack of inventory, and at some point, even the low rates will not help because people will be priced out.
Mortgage rates also turned higher at the start of this month, making those pricey homes even pricier. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
And of course, all real estate is local, and today's report on home sales showed that some regions are stronger than others. The Northeast, for example, saw the biggest increase in sales in August, while the West actually saw a decline. Joining us now, two realtors who are on the front lines in those two areas. From the Northeast, it's Buddy West. He's president of Emery Hill Residential in Wilmington, Delaware. And from the West, Courtney Hall with Keller Williams in Burbank, California. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Courtney, as it happens, Sue and I grew up in the area where you work now, and I'm very well aware that it can be sometimes a very hot market, sometimes a very cold market. Right now, I hear you have a reluctance of buyers. Why? What's going on there?
Well, I think that the buyers are just a little more cautious right now. They are worried that they're buying at the height of the market. So they're just a little more hesitant.
So the affordability issue is playing into it here, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Buddy, what about in your neck of the woods? I believe you're down in Delaware, beautiful state.
Yes.
But the Northeast also saw the loss of state and local tax deductions in many states. How are things in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's interesting. Delaware is very interesting because you have northern Delaware, southern Delaware. Southern Delaware is on the ocean. It's a big place for people to retire. It's on the beach, and obviously the demand is very high. When you come north, it's a little slower on the rise. However, we're so close to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, and New York. We're the hub. So they're the places that are really doing incredibly well, and we're picking up some of that business as well.
Every time I pass through Delaware, it seems like there's more construction going on. Do you have a lot going on there, do you?
Well, that's what our state thing is. The blacktop is basically our state item. They're constantly redoing the roads.
Courtney, what about the quality of the homes that are for sale? I mean, we all know that it's expensive to live in California, and if you're moving from a state out of state into California, you can get some sticker shock. So with the inventory that's available, what are buyers telling you?
So I think that's part of what slowed is the home sales is the quality of the inventory right now. You know, when a home is of good quality, it goes really quickly. You know, there will be a couple offers over the asking price and it will go quickly. You know, not as many offers as there was last year. Last year we were seeing 10 and 12 on one home. This year you'll get, 3 to 4 on those good quality homes. But I think one reason that it's slowed is the quality of the inventory that's out there has declined a little bit. And, the prices are, sometimes they're a little overpriced and things like that, and so the buyers are a little more hesitant.
We anecdotally, Courtney, we've heard that Asian buyers aren't coming in as much as they have there on the West Coast. Are you seeing that at all in your part of Los Angeles?
I don't know if I'm allowed to comment on the demographics of home buyers ethically. I don't know.
Well, where do a lot of your buyers come from? I mean, as Sue mentioned, out of state, when they come to California, they often will get sticker shock. But coming from other parts of the world, I wonder if that's the case as well.
Yeah, there is. So I will say that, a lot of people are more so moving out of state than coming into state. Most of my buyers in Burbank and the surrounding areas, they work for the studios, they work in the movie industry and things like that. And that's where most of my buyers are coming from, and they're first and second time buyers from those industries. But I do see a good amount of buyers from other places, not necessarily out of state, but even out of the country.
Yeah.
Buddy, talk to me about the tax situation. You're in Delaware, a tax-advantaged state. Have you seen a migration from high-tax states down into Delaware? Has that been a factor in fueling the move in your real estate market?
Yes, we have. As a matter of fact, the surrounding states, the quality of life here and the cost of living is much lower than most of our surrounding states. But interestingly enough, there's a lot of still international money coming into our state, and we're so close, like I said, so close to Philadelphia, 35 miles away. A lot of that is coming in. It's just great, and I think it's a generational item as well. A lot of millennials now are starting on the move to get into their house.
Is this the beginning of a pickup for you, buddy? We're talking about nationally that we had a kind of a sluggish market overall this summer, but it sounds like you haven't had that situation.
We've been, like, Delaware is coming out now. It's coming out. It's going up a little bit at a time. But now, if you look at it, it's based on jobs creation. And obviously, we've created triple-figure jobs in the last probably 18, 20 months. So with that happening, there's more employment. Unemployment's 3.7. So all these factors are going to help. More companies are moving into the Northeast. So we think there's going to be a really vibrant market in the next 6 to 18 months.
Buddy West from Emery Hill Residential, Courtney Hall from Keller Williams Burbank. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
On Wall Street, the strong home sales report was not enough to give the market a broad boost. Stocks searched for direction, holding steady just under all-time highs as investors remain concerned about the trade war between the U.S. and China. We'll have more on that in just a minute. But first, here are the closing numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 52 points to 27,094. The Nasdaq was up 5, and the S&P 500 was basically unchanged, recording very slight gains.
The global economy overall is growing at its slowest pace since the Great Recession. That's the finding of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That group today downgraded its outlook for the global economy to 2.9% growth for this year, citing the U.S.-China trade war and the potential for a no-Brexit deal. It also pointed out that investors are holding massive amounts of risky debt, specifically leveraged corporate loans.
As trade tensions take a toll on global economic growth, trade negotiators from the U.S. and China are back at work trying to hammer out their differences. Kayla Tausche reports tonight from Washington.
Dozens of Chinese officials arriving at U.S. government offices today for the first face-to-face trade talks since a June truce fell apart. Both sides want to de-escalate tensions, though serious issues between the economies remain.
The question now is whether or not that China wants to do a deal. I think we have a sense China wants to do a deal. We just don't know if they want to do it yet.
While a broad deal remains elusive, this week's agenda tackles specific issues, according to sources. Currency, which the Treasury says China manipulates, fentanyl, which the U.S. says China still ships here, and agriculture, in focus for President Trump as farm finances struggle. China halted purchases of U.S. farm crops this summer, but there could be an end in sight After talks wrap in Washington, China's Vice Minister of Agriculture will take a smaller group to Nebraska and Montana to meet with U.S. farmers personally. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue said that visit could accompany a purchase agreement.
There's really more than just purchases here. There are structural reforms that the Chinese know that we have to have over non-tariff issues as well. And we hope that these purchases or agreements or these talks this coming week can lead fruitful and give momentum, as was said, into further discussions of a trade resolution.
The goal of deputies this week isn't to broker a deal. It's to set the table for a meeting among principals next month and a meeting between the country's two leaders after that. An advisor to President Trump telling the South China Morning Post if he doesn't get a big deal and soon, tariffs could skyrocket. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Kayla Tausche at the White House.
Time to take a look at some of today's upgrades and downgrades. We begin with shares of Costco. They were downgraded today to underperform from market perform at Bernstein. The analyst says that investors are overpaying for the quality of earnings, dividends, and defensiveness. Price target $230. That stock fell about 1.5% today to close at $287.83. U.S. Steel was downgraded to underperform from outperform at Macquarie. The analyst expects steel prices to stay weak and therefore the company's cash flow to be under pressure. The price target there, $9. That stock was down 11% today to $11.06.
Brown-Forman was downgraded to underperform from inline at Evercore ISI. The analyst cites the stock's valuation. The price target is 60. The stock fell a fraction to 64.30. Coverage of Beyond Meat was initiated with an overweight rating at Barclays. The company says Beyond Meat is, quote, well positioned for the future. The price target is $185. The shares rose a fraction to $154.92.
Still ahead, the growth in gaming and Apple's strategy to become a bigger player in that industry.
The House has passed a short-term spending bill that would prevent a government shutdown at the end of the month. The measure gives lawmakers until Thanksgiving to pass more than $1 trillion worth of annual funding bills. The Senate is scheduled to approve the stopgap measure next week.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today unveiled a proposal to lower prescription drug prices. Her plan would allow the federal government to every year negotiate the prices of some of the most costly drugs that lack price competition. And the bill would also impose penalties on those drug companies that refuse to negotiate.
Makes lower drug prices negotiated by Medicare available to all Americans. It stops drug companies from ripping off Americans while charging other countries less for the drug.
Pelosi said that she consulted the White House while developing this bill, and she's hoping for bipartisan support.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is in Washington talking to lawmakers about internet regulation and privacy protections. Zuckerberg had dinner last night with some of his biggest critics, including Senator Mark Warner.
Mr. Zuckerberg has said that he's willing to work with us on legislation. The challenge to a degree has been, can we get some of this legislation to the floor? I think we are way behind already, behind Europe and behind states like California on privacy legislation. I also think we need legislation that would ensure that as users, we have a right to know when we're being communicated with by a human being versus a bot. I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to know what data is being collected about us, how much it's worth.
Senator Warner also said that the Wild West days of social media must end.
Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos has a new plan to tackle climate change. And today he said he's committing his company to meeting the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement 10 years ahead of schedule.
It's a difficult challenge for us because we have deep, large physical infrastructure. We're not only moving information around, we're moving packages around. We deliver 10 billion items, more than 10 billion items a year. This is real physical infrastructure at real scale. And so we can make the argument, and we plan to do so passionately, that if we can do this, anyone can do this.
Bezos expects 80% of Amazon's energy use to come from renewable sources by 2024. That's up from the current levels of 40%. His goal eventually is to transition to zero emissions by 2030.
And now to Apple and its push into gaming. The company today launched its new video game subscription service called Arcade. It's all part of the company's move to expand its business beyond its flagship iPhone. Josh Lipton is in San Francisco for us tonight.
More than 2 billion people will play video games around the world this year. Apple now hopes some of them will give its new service a try. Arcade is a subscription service which at $5 per month also includes access for up to 6 family members. It will feature more than 100 new exclusive titles. The company reportedly spent hundreds of millions of dollars to secure these new games.
We're adding a whole new way to enjoy games on the App Store with Apple Arcade. We've joined forces with the world's most innovative game developers to push the boundaries of what's possible.
It's no surprise that Tim Cook wants a greater piece of the game industry. Total game revenues this year are expected to reach nearly $150 billion. The success of the service will come down to the content, which experts say must be fun, engaging entertainment to win over gamers. But does Apple also need a breakout hit, a marquee title that draws in gamers? Analysts say not necessarily, that Apple just needs enough good games to justify $5 a month. Analysts don't think Arcade will have a big impact on Apple's bottom line, but they do think Arcade could help bolster what investors do care a lot about, the company's faster-growing, higher-margin services segment. By some estimates, potentially adding $7 billion in revenue over the next 3 to 5 years. Apple might also have competition. Google is highlighting its own game subscription service that could be coming soon. No details yet, though, on pricing, content, or a launch date. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Josh Lipton, San Francisco.
Sales come up short at Darden restaurants, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus with the parent of Olive Garden and other restaurant chains reporting profit that was better than expected, a penny better. But revenue was light despite positive results from Olive Garden, Capital Grille, and Longhorn Steakhouse. Casual dining chains overall have been struggling as consumers opt for healthier food. Darden shares fell 5% today to 120.68. Diageo showed today that it's not immune to global trade policy changes, but the world's largest spirits maker did say it's on track to meet its sales targets, and as a result, it maintained its full-year outlook. As for trade issues, though, Diageo has been making a big push into the Chinese market, and it recently raised concerns about its Scotch brands being dragged into the trade dispute between the U.S. and Europe. Diageo was off for a fraction today to 163.10. Famed short seller Jim Chanos said today he's betting against Grubhub. The hedge fund manager says the delivery company faces major competition and labor issues, and it doesn't help that the restaurant business overall is stagnant.
Right now, Grubhub is making almost no money per order, something like 15 cents an order. I mean, there's just no margin in this business. And you're basically putting 2 more hands outstretched, for the restaurant guy saying, pay the delivery company, pay the driver for money that they're really not making.
Shares of Grubhub slid by 5% today to 60.51.
Walgreens will be the first retailer in the U.S. to test on-demand drone delivery services. The pilot program will be conducted in conjunction with Alphabet's drone delivery service called Wing. The program will deliver food, beverages, and over-the-counter medications, but not prescriptions. Walgreens rose a fraction to 54.57. Truck maker Navistar will idle production of commercial trucks for General Motors starting next week. The company says that due to the labor strike at the automaker, it'll run out of parts for GM trucks by tomorrow. Navistar assembles trucks for GM as a contractor at one of its plants. Navistar rose nearly 1% to $29.30. After the bell today, Texas Instruments said it plans to hike its dividend by 17%. The chipmaker will have a quarterly payout of 90 cents a share. The higher rate must formally be declared by the company's board. The stock was steady in after-hours trading, but it finished the regular session down a fraction to 128.83. And the cloud software company Datadog had a strong Wall Street debut. Datadog competes with cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft, Cisco, and Zoom. Its stock priced at $27 a share and climbed to more than $40 at the open. The shares ended the day up 39% at $37.55.
Before companies can go public, they need to prove that they can grow as a private company. And to grow as a private company, they need to prove that they are worth investing in. In other words, they need funding. But research shows that some startups run by women are not getting as much financing as their male counterparts. Julia Borston has the story, though, of one investor who's trying to close that gap.
Investor Edith Dorson sees an opportunity in closing a gender gap for entrepreneurs, which is why she's raised 2 venture capital funds investing in gender-balanced teams, raising their A-stage funding, a key moment for startups, which are starting to gain traction to secure financing to grow.
We are seeing a very large and growing percentage of our deal flow that is, in fact, Series A ready.
Companies with at least one female founder have raised less than 16% of all venture capital funding in the first 8 months of this year, according to PitchBook. Entrepreneurs' chances of raising capital declines between the early seed financing, their very first funding round, and the A round, when they're looking for bigger checks to scale their businesses. And it's even harder for companies with a female founder, which see a bigger drop between seed and Series A deals.
Very few institutions are yet putting capital in at the stage we're talking about, which is where we think the bottleneck is. Specifically in what we refer to as Series A.
Dorson sees an untapped opportunity in focusing on female-led startups, which may not get as much attention from male venture capital partners. And her focus has drawn the backing of both institutional and individual investors. One of those investors is the Carlyle Group's Chief Transformation Officer, Reggie Van Lee, who was an executive at Booz Allen Hamilton for over 30 years.
This equity issue that exists with respect to women and getting access to capital is something that needs to be fixed. And not fixed just because it would be a nice thing to do, but because there's money being left on the table.
One of Dorson's investments is Hop, Skip, Drive, a transportation service for kids, co-founded by Joanna McFarland and 2 other moms.
I'm really proud that we had a number of investors that specifically invest in female entrepreneurs and a number of female funds that invested in that round because they saw the potential in what we were doing. And since then, our growth has just taken off.
That A-round investment enabled Hop, Skip, Drive to expand the potential for its ride service for kids age 6 and up. Originally just for parents, it's now focusing on working with schools. Now McFarland says the company has contracts with 170 schools and districts across 7 states, growing its revenue by 3 times this year. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
Coming up, the safest electric vehicles on the road today. There are now 530 confirmed and probable cases of vaping-related illnesses. According to the Centers for Disease Control, that is up from 380 a week ago. The FDA is also investigating more than 150 products and has disclosed a criminal probe. But the probe is examining the supply chain of vaping products, not individual vapors.
Finally tonight, brand new crash test results of alternative-powered vehicles show that some of them are among the safest models on the road. So it raises the question, are electric vehicles, which have battery packs and relatively small motors, safer than cars and trucks with internal combustion engines? Phil LeBeau has our story.
Crash tests of electric vehicles and a hydrogen fuel cell SUV show 3 of the models handle a variety of collisions better than many vehicles. In fact, 2 electric vehicles, the Tesla Model 3 and Audi e-tron, along with the Hyundai Nexo, a hydrogen fuel cell SUV, got the best rating possible from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. The Chevy Bolt also did well in the crash test, but did not get a top safety rating due to concerns about its headlights.
For sure, we can say that the vehicles we've recently tested
have the same state-of-the-art protection that we see in more traditionally designed vehicles.
Most EVs are built with large battery packs positioned on the floor of the vehicle. So models like those built by Tesla have a storage cabin in the front of the vehicle, where a large engine is typically located for internal combustion vehicles. Some believe no engine means a lower chance of passengers being injured in EV collisions, but experts have not reached that conclusion.
The fact that the battery can be placed in a variety of places, maybe with more flexibility than a gas tank, does provide the potential to make electric vehicles safer, or at least as safe, if not safer, than traditional vehicles.
The IIHS also notes the risk of a battery fire after a collision is not a major concern, since the casings holding the batteries have held up well in crash tests. In short, these tests are fresh evidence some electric vehicles look to be as safe as other models. Safety may not be a major issue for those considering an electric vehicle, but supply definitely is. The number of EVs on the market is still relatively low, which is why the number of electric vehicles actually sold in the U.S. is a small percentage of total vehicle sales. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
And before we go, here's a look at the day's final numbers from Wall Street. The Dow fell 52 points. NASDAQ was up 5, and the S&P 500 saw very slight gains. That is Nightly Business Report tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.